Bonjour, relatives. My name is Nicole Matthews. Maidu Beneshikwe, Indigenous Migizin Dodame. My name is Nicole Matthews, and I'm the Executive Director of the Minnesota Indian Women's Sexual Assault Coalition. Thank you for joining us today. We want to make sure that we start this event in a good way, so we have asked Janice Badmoccasin to do an opening prayer for us. Janice Badmoccasin is an enrolled tribal member of the Crow Creek Dakota Nation. Sorry about that. Her position and role as a spiritual advisor and healing practitioner has been of services to Dakota and various tribal members who have been impacted by intergenerational trauma, recovery, and spiritual support. She has provided many opening reflections and prayer for spiritual grounding at conferences and gatherings for various organizations and our Native communities. And Janice is also a good friend of mine, and I am honored to have you here today. Welcome, Janice.
Thank you. Greetings, relatives, to this very important and well-needed event in our Indian country. I want to thank you, MIWRC and MMIW, for allowing me to share my sincerity and exercising my love for the Creator with all of you today. I'm very honored to provide the spiritual grounding for this event, as it is a personal healing work of ours together. I would like to just share with you that over the years I've worked with many families with grief support and providing them spiritual support due to loss of loved ones, due to addiction, suicide, end of life, and victims of murder as well. So I know that this work is a sacrifice and it's hard. So prayer is very important to ground ourselves together as one collectively. So I took the opagi, the chandi that was given to me to offer a prayer with all of you today. And to me, in my healing and prayer work, I always like to share with our relatives that the prayer is a very personal offering of ourselves. It's as if we become the ceremony. It's as if we walk this ceremony together in prayer. And you know, over years, I've learned that to become one with the sacred Chanupa as a human being, our spinal column is the wood stem. The red sacred bowl of the pipe is our hearts, wochante, where all the power of our feelings come from. And the tobacco offerings would be our thoughts, free will and choice as human beings. And this offering would go in to our Chanupa. And the walk of prayer would be how we are good relatives, how we've helped the people, how we've carried these sacred holy values of love, compassion, respect, generosity, humbleness, courage, truth, and prayer. And so with that in mind, I invite you to pray with me in this understanding and this spiritual feeling. I invite you to quieten your spirits with me as I pray and share prayer with all of you today. Otunkashira wakantanka, unchimaka, tate topa wamakashka da kushkashka, nina wopiratunka, ampetu kinde washte, chante washte na pechi yuzapiye. Creator, God, Gichimanadu, we pray to you, we send our voice to you. Ho uwaya, we send our voice to you. And from our wochante, our feelings, and for the families who were impacted by loss of loved ones. As we remember them and we do this work in honoring of them. I shall live and pray with my relatives today as one. Help us, have pity on us as we walk forward in this very important healing work. Let our voices be heard and known in the places we need to go. We do this out of love for our people, for our families, for our relatives, and for you, Washtechida. Iho, mitakuye owasi, all my relatives.
Janice.
So I want to offer to you to have a blessed day, and that I know the youth are speaking. I'm very proud of them. I prayed that everything go well in this grounding. Welcome to the leaders, and to you, Nicole, Guadalupe, Angelica, and Linda, my dear friends. Thank you for this important work. Oha, I walk with you today, and I'll be listening in, and I'll see you at the end of for the closing prayer. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you so much. So I'm Nicole Matthews, the Executive Director of the Minnesota Indian Women Sexual Assault Coalition, and I will be your host and MC today. We are virtual this year, but for 6 years, we have marched in the bitter cold on February 14th to demand visibility and justice for our people. One of the things that I miss most about not having this event in person is not being able to see all the faces of our relatives whose stories bring this issue to life. This day is not just about saying all the right words. It's about raising the visibility. It's about telling our stories. It's about taking to the streets to let people know that we are still here and our stories, our people, our lives deserve compassion, respect, honor, and to be valued, heard, and loved. With permission, please share the pictures of your relatives on the Facebook feed. Even in this virtual world, we want to make sure we see their faces. We will be posting their images on a banner throughout the live stream so we can make sure that we bring their faces into this virtual space. They are why we are here today. They are why we march in the cold Minnesota streets in February. They are why we keep pushing, keep working, keep demanding change. The continued failure to adequately respond to and protect our Indigenous relatives is a human rights issue. We can and we must do better. This event came together with the partnership and collaboration of many people and organizations, and I want to say Chimigwich to everyone for your efforts and for all the work that went into planning this event. One of those partners is Anishinaabe Academy. Anishinaabe Academy is a Minneapolis public schools elementary school. They are a citywide school that focuses on Dakota and Ojibwe culture and language. In 2019, Anishinaabe Academy was invited to join the MMIW March in Minneapolis. In the months leading up to the event, they collaborated with community partners to create a curriculum based on the theme, "You are sacred, valuable, indispensable, and irreplaceable." This is a line taken from the poem, "The Things We Taught Our Daughters" by Helen Knott. Despite being a heavy topic, they knew it was critical to teach their kids about the MMIW movement, as even their youngest are affected by this issue, as this issue does not discriminate by age. They chose their theme as they wanted their curriculum to focus on spirit building and celebrating the assets of their children. We're going to show 2 videos today. In the first video, you will see the students marching in 2019, the first march that they participated in. And you will also see them marching in 2020 as the 4th and 5th graders actually led the march with the MMIW song and sang on the hill by the Dakota Prep for participants honoring our MMIW relatives in the march. In the second video, you will see and hear poems written by their 5th grade students. One of the staff from the school says, "Our kids are amazing, and we appreciate the chance to show off and celebrate their work." We will now go to the videos.
Today I'm going to be dancing to power music for the missing murdered Indigenous women.
You're a First Nations relative, irreplaceable, beyond beautiful, strong-minded, have a huge heart, can go further than the start.
You're sacred, valuable, indispensable, and irreplaceable. Because we are strong.
You're always caring, loving, never weak, and smarter than you think.
Remember those things. I'm shining and we are rising.
So I don't think it's right that people take these women and just to think about how they're feeling and how scared they are right now. I don't like people who have been missing for a while. I could not stand being in that position like that. So I don't understand why people have to do this. I do not think it's right, and yeah.
We wear red because we are strong. We wear red because we know things from right and wrong. We wear red because we want justice. We wear red because they kill the ones who are the youngest. Okay, I'm gonna go to my poem. To my family, remember you're sacred, valuable, irreplaceable. Remember those things. I'm shining and you're rising.
You're a First Nations relative, irreplaceable, beyond beautiful, strong-minded, have a huge heart, can go further than the start. You're always caring, loving, never weak, and smarter than you think. Always know that you need to be careful with your surroundings. Always listen to your gut instincts or when your heart starts pounding. Always keep someone near to help you in case you are ever in fear. Keep your cultural ceremonies in the light that may help you when you are in a fright. Women and relatives are not objects, toys, or animals. You wouldn't think that when our Native women are going missing. International. We march because it brings awareness to a topic that some can care less. To show our relatives they are not forgotten, to be those relatives' voices who've been taken. For remember, you are a First Nations relative. This fight is never over.
Oh, that was beautiful. What a beautiful way to start. Our youth are incredible, and I'm so glad we were able to start that way. I want to also, someone had messaged me and said that people were having difficulties posting photos on the Facebook feed. So we are trying to resolve that. If you're not able to post a photo of your loved one in the live stream feed, please post their names. Let's bring them into the space. We're going to keep posting the comments in the live stream. And so we want to make sure that in some way we bring them into this space, because that's what this day is about. That's what this event is about. That's why we do this every year. In Minnesota, we are so fortunate to have Native representation in our governor's office. Lieutenant Governor Flanagan has been an advocate and a community leader for many years leading up to her role as the Lieutenant Governor. She has worked tirelessly to ensure that our voices are heard and represented, and she has shown up for us and with us time and time again. I am very honored to introduce Lieutenant Governor Flanagan to our event today. Welcome, Lieutenant Governor.
Uju, thank you so much, Nicole. And I have my daughter here with me. And we talked about this last night and about what we were doing today. And I asked her, what should people know about the way that we should treat Native women and girls? And she said that we should treat them with kindness and respect and the way that we want to be treated. And so I think that that's a good way for us to start, and that is the bare minimum that we should be asking for. So miigwech, Nicole, for putting together this virtual event. And I'm sad we can't gather together like we've done in past years, but this is still a powerful way for us to be in community. And I'm in my kitchen, which is where you would be if you were in my home. So that's makes a lot of sense for all of us today. And as we have done for years, we will do again today in honoring our loved ones and our relatives and raise an urgent call to action. And I'm grateful that we can come together. At last year's March, we were able to celebrate the creation of the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women's Task Force in Minnesota. And this work stood on the shoulders of so many. Now we gather here to celebrate the work of this same task force. In December, the task force released their final report and recommendations in partnership with the Department of Public Safety. I'm endlessly grateful to the work of every member of that task force, to the families and survivors who shared their stories with them, and to all of the people who made it possible. Miigwech, Senator Kunesh, and Nicole for your leadership in bringing folks together. And I'm grateful to Commissioner Harrington The whole team at the Department of Public Safety focused on this critical work around the state. And to Nigel Perot. Nigel Perot has taken a new role outside of DPS, but I would be remiss if I did not thank him for all of the incredible work that he did with the task force while centering those most directly impacted and the voices of Native people directly. The task force report provides a roadmap of the future, which was the goal, but it also explores how this crisis of missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, trans, and two-spirit people came to be and how it impacts our communities and our families. This crisis is complicated by the layers of invisibility that affect our Indigenous communities and has only served to intensify the issue of our missing and murdered relatives and the lack of effective responses and prevention. So that's why I'm really honored to be able to share today that the governor and I have included the creation of the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women Office housed in the Department of Public Safety per the very first recommendation of the task force report in our 2021 budget proposal. We believe that this office is a critical next step in turning the task force work into action and to carry out this important work into the future. In addition to the office, I want to share other aspects of our administration's response to prevent and eventually end the crisis of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls and the threat of trafficking across the state. We have heard the concerns from people in the community, specifically about the Line 3 project, and I want to speak directly to that in my community. As many of you know, I have long opposed the Line 3 replacement project, and my position has not changed. But I can't stop it. So I'm focused on what I can do, and that is to work to minimize the impact of trafficking on our communities. And that in turn will increase the awareness of trafficking and the awareness of MMIW and turn that into real action. We are deeply committed to working in partnership and with community and local and state organizations to ensure that this project does not contribute to the ongoing crisis. Just as it has for years, our Bureau of Criminal Apprehension has partnered directly with Tribes United Against Trafficking Task Force, the Trust Task Force, and other law enforcement agencies to raise awareness, encourage prevention, and enforce sex trafficking laws. I continue to meet with these leaders of this work to determine how to increase the reach and effectiveness of these campaigns. But we also know that the issue of trafficking is far greater than one project. It has been with us since colonization began. It's happening in communities across the state and the country, and we need to step up and prevent it whenever and wherever it occurs. We want it to end with us. And that is what the task force helps to do. Measure the crisis and educate. And it's why, in addition to the creation of a permanent missing and murdered Indigenous women office, our administration has taken key steps in the budget proposal to increase support of these prevention efforts across the state. The governor and I have dedicated $2.5 million in our budget, in addition to the current $2 million allocated to the Office of Justice Program sex trafficking grants. The funding will be used to support local agencies, prevent and respond to trafficking, and support survivors. Additionally, our budget includes $10 million for grants to provide additional crime victims and survivor resources and resources to stop the cycles of violence. You all know how firsthand this matters because you are the leaders doing the work. And the organizations who've been doing this work for decades have the connections and expertise to work with survivors and work to prevent this work. And we need to support them. Paired with the creation of the permanent missing and murdered Indigenous Women's Office, we're going to do all we can to work with the legislature to get this additional funding across the finish line in this budget session. And we need your help to do so. But we measure what we care about and we invest in what we measure. The work of the task force helps to shed the light on this issue. And events like today, filled with so many of you, ensure that we are no longer invisible. And when we have Native women in positions of leadership, like Reps Deb Haaland, hopefully future Secretary of the Interior Haaland, Congresswoman Davids, Representative Ruth Ann Buffalo in North Dakota, our very own Representative Keeler and Senator Kunesh taking seats in the Minnesota legislature, and Representative Jamie Becker-Finn. Telling these stories helps to break this invisibility. And every time we bring our full Native selves to the table, no matter what room we're in, it helps to break that invisibility. That's why I'm grateful for the opportunity to be with all of you today and to share a proclamation on behalf of the state of Minnesota. The governor and I proclaimed today, February 14th, 2021, as Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women Awareness Day across the state. So I'm going to read the proclamation now. Whereas, although American Indian women and girls make up just 1% of the state's population, 8% of all women and girls murdered in Minnesota from 2010 through 2018 were American Indian. And whereas between 27 and 54 American Indian women and girls in Minnesota were missing in any given month from 2012 to 2020, and whereas Indigenous women, girls, men, boys, LGBTQI plus, two-spirit, transgender, and gender nonconforming people continue to be targeted for murder and or abduction across Minnesota's urban, rural, and reservation populations, disappearing at alarming rates with very little public visibility or justice. And whereas, according to the National Crime Information Database, over 84% of Native women experience violence in their lifetimes, and more than 4 out of 5, or 86%, experience sexual violence. Whereas this is an ongoing crisis that affects Indian country, on and off reservation, in urban and rural communities, and an astounding 97% are victims of non-Native perpetrators. And whereas Indigenous women continue to have the highest rates of forcible sexual assault and reported rates of domestic violence, up to 10 times higher than all other women in the US. And whereas there is no comprehensive estimate of Indigenous women who are missing or who have been murdered since the beginning of colonization. Whereas the targeting of Indigenous people for violence and invisibility of harm experienced by Indigenous people remains a human rights issue. And whereas Minnesota is committed to bringing awareness of our Indigenous women, girls, men, boys, and LGBTQI plus, two-spirit, transgender, and gender nonconforming relatives who have gone missing or who have been murdered, tortured, raped, trafficked, and assaulted, and who have not had a proper attention or have achieved justice. And whereas we act in solidarity with our Canadian Indigenous relatives and their MMIW movement, and recognize February 14th as Missing and Murdered Indigenous Relatives Awareness Day, always seeking to build upon and support our Indigenous communities to stop this epidemic and heal within our communities and as a state. Now, therefore, I, Tim Walls, and Peggy Flanagan do hereby proclaim Sunday, February 14th, 2021 as Missing and Murdered Indigenous Relatives Awareness Day in the state of Minnesota. Proclamations are important because they help us talk about and honor the issues that matter. But it is also important that we are taking concrete action to continue the awareness and raising the incredible work of the MMIW task force. We need your help to do this. But with leadership from Senator Kunesh and all of you, we are hopeful to find the same bipartisan support that we found when we passed the task force legislation. Your persistence, your courage, your bravery, your leadership, and your deep love of our people are the reasons why the task force was passed nearly 2 years ago. I know we can do it again. Miigwech for sharing your stories and for making your voices heard. And I thank you for not letting the lives and memories of our relatives be lost in the fight. Because as much as we are fighting for increased data and clearer awareness of statistics, we cannot lose the human beings, our relatives, that are at the center of that data. Miigwech for having me today at this rally. Miigwech for making this world a better and safer and more welcoming place for my daughter. And I look forward to the day when we can gather together again in community and hug one another and celebrate the victories of passing more investments in the things that we care about and measuring the things we care about so that we can prevent them from happening in the first place. I'll hand it back to you, Nicole. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lieutenant Governor. We're so grateful to you and to the governor and for your many years of work on this issue. And thank you so much for showing up every day. Good. Thank you, everyone. Minnesota has been a leader in addressing this issue on a policy and legislative issue. Our next panel of speakers will speak to that commitment in Minnesota to address missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, men, boys, LGBTQI, Two-Spirit, transgender, and gender non-conforming. Senator Kunesh is the author of the MMIW Task Force legislation. She's an incredible community advocate. She's the chair of the MMIW Task Force and an amazing Native sister that I am so happy to work alongside. Public Safety Commissioner Harrington is a former police officer, and his staff oversee the MMIW Task Force. Commissioner Harrington is an impassioned speaker and an advocate on this issue. The commissioner spoke at our event last year, and we are so grateful to welcome him back today. Welcome, Senator Kunesh and Commissioner Harrington.
Thank you so much, Nicole, for inviting me to be here with all of you today. We can't be there in person, but we absolutely are with all of our relatives and our community in spirit. Thank you.
Good morning, Nicole, and thank you all for joining us today, for calling out those women who are missing and those women who have been trafficked, and making sure that their memories will never be lost.
Thank you both. Senator Kunesh, maybe we'll start with you, and you can talk about, we passed the legislation, we have a task force, we did some incredible work in the last 18 months. A very short amount of time, really, to get this work done. Can you talk about kind of what's happening with the task force right now?
Oh, yes. Well, the important thing is that we were able to come together so well under the organizing and structure that Nigel Perot was able to put together. And of course, our Nicole Rogers-Matthews from Wilder Institute was very instrumental in organizing the information and scheduling the events. And I feel like that is a big part of the success of this task force. We set out to really focus on and identify the root causes of why our relatives went missing for so long. And we needed to identify those risk factors, child welfare system, domestic violence, incarceration, prostitution, and trafficking. And along the way, we recognized that there was always a problem with investigation and jurisdiction, how these atrocities were prosecuted and sentenced. Of course, we really struggled with having data that we could use to make our point or prove our point, or, in the beginning, to legitimize the need for this task force. And of course, we really worked hard on our public awareness. And I have to say, in the 4 years, it's been pretty astounding how well people have paid attention, have asked questions, and asked how they could help. And so our ultimate goal is to build within our systems and build new systems that are going to allow us to address and prevent those, our relatives, our Indigenous women and girls and LGBTQ and Two-Spirit, all of them, from becoming a statistic, from being a number or a person on that data sheet. And so just as the lieutenant, and we have to thank the lieutenant governor and the governor so much for their dedication and focus on this task force, and now supporting it as we go forward with some of our recommendations. And of course, education is paramount in alleviating some of these issues. I've been a teacher for 25 years, and we talk about these things in our classrooms. We talk about violence and consent and domestic issues, because we are one of those safe places that kids can come to. And so it's so important that we as legislators recognize the value of educating around consent, healthy relationships, no means no, those sort of things. We need to really look at, and we will be working with child welfare agencies to ensure that that our families remain intact. It's really heartbreaking to know that our Native kids are removed from their families, from their culture at the highest rate of any other population, generally placed with non-Native families, a direct pipeline into to future events that could make them susceptible to trafficking and violence. We have our commissioner here, so we're looking for ways that we can expand ways to address this through our law enforcement and courts and criminal justice, and then looking at the industries that seem to attract perpetrators for sexual violence and that kind of thing that happens with our, large sporting events, hunting and fishing events, extraction industries. There all are those focuses. And then, of course, we want to always remember who is at the core of these events or the work that we do, and that is the community. And we want to continue to bring the community. We want to hear those stories. We want to hear the voices. They're the ones that really probably know what the solutions are to some of these issues. And so just as we began with the voices and the influence of the community, we want to, in every way, to continue to work with our community, work with our tribes, our urban natives, and build the kind of Minnesota that we can be proud of, where everybody is safe, where everybody is loved wholeheartedly, and that we don't have to have task forces around prevention of violence and murder in any population. So thank you again, Nicole, for allowing me to be here with you today. And thank you, all of you. I miss not being with you today. It's cold, so it's nice to be inside, but it is your faces, it is your voices that moves us along the way. Wopalatanka.
Miigwech, Senator. You and I have been on many of these panels lately, so I really appreciate you coming today. And we're lucky to be inside and warm, and also I think about all of our relatives who are not so lucky and who are outside right now in the cold, and whose families are out there looking for them. So thank you for showing up.
Thank you.
Commissioner, I want to turn to you. Department of Public Safety. You have the tribal liaison, Nigel Perot, that really helped the task force. If we get the budget passed for this MMIW office, will be housed within the Department of Public Safety. You can speak to the commitment of the Department of Public Safety on this issue. Thank you, Nicole.
I need to start by thanking Lieutenant Governor Flanagan for the proclamation, making the proclamation, and the Lieutenant Governor has been there every step along the way, prompting and guiding and pushing and opening doors to make sure that this work happened and that it will continue to happen. And I want to thank, obviously, Governor Tim Walz for his leadership also, and your leadership, and Senator Kanesh's leadership also. At DPS, we were empowered and entrusted with studying how our sisters and how our mothers and how our aunties are killed in record numbers. We were entrusted with looking into and trying to understand how our moms and our sisters and our wives can be missing and not be found. And it's heartbreaking to know that in Minnesota, while Native Americans make up less than 1% or about 1% of the state's population, 9% of the murdered women in the state are Native American. On any given month, 54 American Indian women and girls are missing. That, I want you to think, and those are statistics, and I know they're statistics, but those aren't statistics because those are somebody's daughter, that's somebody's mom, that's somebody's aunt, that's somebody who's got a name and a history and a family that is grieving over their loss. And so we cannot get too caught up with the numbers, although I think the numbers paint such a stark and horrific picture of this. And to those women that are still out there missing, I want them to know that I and the BCA and law enforcement and Department of Public Safety are looking for you, that we have not given up, that we are going to find you, and that you should have faith in that. I always want you to know, and I do thank Nigel, who moved on from us to do great work in the sexual assault arena, and Kate Weeks, who's still here at OJP, for their work. Because of their work, DPS is calling out issues of colonialism and racism and the sexual objectification of Native women and girls as the root causes of this horror story. And I think it's important that we haven't sugarcoated that. I think there were a lot of people who would have liked us to say, well, this is a bad thing and bad things happen. And we were not willing to say that. We were going to call out truth before power and say to those in power that we recognize how this horror story started. And without looking at that history, we cannot have any hope that we will put an end to it. And put an end to it is what we have to be committed to doing. I'm really excited about the possibilities of the recommendations that come out of this report. And in no small part, that the idea of not just an office, but a permanent office that are going to be there for missing and murdered Indigenous women is a powerful statement that says we have not given up, that we are putting our money and our people where our passions are. And I can tell you that because of this work, Representative Richardson has already started a conversation about something similar in other communities. And that's where my history with this started, with Joy Freeman and others working for Breaking Free back in the day. And so I am really excited about the idea that we're going to work and have the passion to get this work done, and that it's not going to stop here. This is the beginning, but we have so much work to do. I'm excited about the idea that we're going to have folks from the community that are going to lead this effort. This is something the state absolutely has to be supportive of, but it has to be led by people who are the closest to the issue. And that means we have to have leadership from our Native community, from our Indigenous community, from our Two-Spirit community. If we're going to solve this problem, we have to have them running the show. Finally, I want you to understand that as I think about this particular issue, and I said this last time, and it still resonates with me as it's my most fervent hope for this, that if we put all of the work and all of the ideas from this report into action, it's my hope that not one more Native woman will be trafficked. It's my hope that not one more Native woman will be abused, and that not one more Native woman will be murdered without justice for them being served. What I really want is that the last name on that roll call of tragedy be the last name. Not one more name should be added to it. Chi-miigwech.
Thank you, Commissioner Harrington. Thank you for your ongoing commitment to this issue. And thank you for your leadership and for showing up for us today. And you know, for your words to really stand and say that we have not given up, that we are still looking, that we will continue looking, because sometimes the families feel so, you know, frustrated and disheartened, and they just want to see their relatives again. They just want closure. They want to know what happened. And so thank you. Thank you for that. And I know that they're not just words. I can feel from the passion that you speak with that they are not just words to you, that you really are committed to doing something, and I appreciate that so much. Thank you. And thank you both for being here today and for your work on this issue, and we'll keep working. The task force is moving into implementation to keep moving along this work, and I know, Senator, you'll keep pushing legislation and make sure that we are seen and heard, and that when there is a policy issue that you're bringing it to the table and including us. So thank you both for joining us today. We are now going to move to a video message that we received from Senator Tina Smith.
Hi, I'm U.S. Senator Tina Smith. Thank you for inviting me to join you in discussing the crisis of missing and murdered Indigenous women, men, girls, boys, Two-Spirit, and transgender people. And while I wish that we could gather in person, I'm glad that we can still meet virtually. We joined together today because for too long, the trauma of missing and murdered Indigenous people has been invisible, and we are all working to change that. Your voices are very strong on this issue. On the Senate Indian Affairs Committee, I feel an urgent responsibility to tell these stories and to move Congress to action. We must reauthorize the Violence Against Women Act this year. It is long overdue. And when we take this action, it must include strong provisions to reduce violence against Native people and crimes on tribal land. It also needs to include my bipartisan Justice for Native Survivors of Sexual Violence Act, which would give tribes jurisdiction to prosecute crimes of sexual violence, stalking, and sex trafficking committed by non-Native offenders on tribal land. This legislation upholds tribal sovereignty and ensures that tribes have the authority to pursue justice for survivors. Passing VAWA is urgently needed, but we also have work to do in raising community awareness and expanding our advocacy and organizing. So I am grateful for you and the persistent, strong community groups in Minnesota working on this issue every day. We are in this fight for missing and murdered Indigenous people at the same time that we are experiencing the terrible impacts of COVID and the uncertainty and trauma that this pandemic brings up, especially if you are feeling disconnected, if you live in an unstable or unsafe situation, if you are experiencing violence at home or you've lost a job or a loved one. This is a very difficult time. So I'm thinking of you and sending you strength. And I'm committed to working with Indigenous leaders in Minnesota and across the country to provide the resources that you need to stay safe and healthy as we work to get the virus under control. So thank you again for having me today. Thank you for your leadership, and I look forward to our continued partnership to address the crisis of missing and murdered Indigenous people.
Oops, I was talking and I was on mute. Miigwech to Senator Tina Smith, who has also been, she was here, sent a message last year and has really shown up for us and is an advocate for us in DC. And so we are very grateful. And I also want to acknowledge the fact that we have our ASL interpreters here today. And I should have mentioned that at the beginning, and also for our speakers who may be listening to try and speak a little slower so that they can hear and they can have time. I know I'm really guilty of talking fast, so my apologies for that. But thank you for being here. And we really want to make sure that this event and all of our events are accessible to everyone, and that we are always doing what we can to bring our Indigenous relatives with disabilities into this space and to make sure that they're included always and that their voices are here as well. Also, I want to remind you to continue putting the names, the stories of our relatives into the chat. We will keep bringing them into the space. As you may have seen, we're putting the comments as they are posted into the Facebook live stream. So keep those coming. So our next panel of speakers are some incredible community activists. These women are not only talking about this issue, they are in the community doing something about it. They are in community looking for our relatives. They are calling on our legislators to action. They are working to protect the environment, and I'm both humbled and honored to have them with us today. Welcome Adriana Goodwin, a citizen of the Red Lake Nation who is pursuing a Master's of Public Policy degree at the Humphrey School of Public Affairs, and Misty Babineau of Min 350, who's a badass and always out in the community. And I'm sure many of you know her. Welcome, ladies.
Bonjour. It's good to be here today.
Thank you for joining us. I'm going to give you each maybe a couple of minutes to give a little bit more introduction of you and the work that you do.
Okay. Bonjour, Adriana Goodwin, Indigenous cause, Washkubanasiko, Ninigo, Mayenga, Nindudem, Misquagami, Wizagaganing, Nindunjaba. Greetings, everybody. My colonized name is Adriana Goodwin. I am known to the spirits as Blue Thunderbird Woman. I am Wolf Clan, and I am from the Red Lake Nation. I am a mom. I have 2 small children who are 8 and 3. They are my pride and joy, and I do this work for them and for all of the other babies and for all of our communities. And it's really good to be here today. Some of my aspirations are to draft, create, and enact policy. That's currently what I'm studying to do, being at the Humphrey School of Public Affairs. And again, it is really such an honor to be here. Miigwech for having me.
Miigwech.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for having me. I must say, though, I really miss being in a sea of my relatives today. I was just looking at the video from last year, and it was just really beautiful, so I may be a little emotional from that. My name is Misty Babineau. I am an enrolled citizen of the Red Lake Nation. I live just outside of St. Paul, Minnesota. I'm a climate justice organizer with Minnesota 350. And to me, that means I'm standing at the intersection of what we would traditionally consider environmental justice issues and social justice issues. And that's where I'm living right now. I'm particularly focused on the intersections of Line 3 extractive industries and the impacts of our relatives and tribal communities along the route. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you both for being here today. I want to go to Misty first, actually. And I know this is not one of the questions we sent you, but not everybody is able to make the connection between environmental justice and violence against women. And so can you help us have an understanding of what is that? What is that connection?
Well, I think you can look at it 2 ways. As Indigenous people, many of us have teachings that, the women are very sacred because we carry that water within us. We are that gateway between the spiritual realm and this physical realm. So, and that water, that medicine we're very connected to it as women. And whatever is happening to the water, if that water is being poisoned or it's being mistreated even, we feel that's happening to us as well. And that ripples out into the community.
Thank you. Thank you for that perspective. And I think, like I said, not a lot of people, not everybody understands what that connection is. And Adriana, it's really wonderful to have you here today, and it's nice to meet you. And maybe I've met you before. I don't know. You seem familiar, or maybe I've just seen you on social media. But thank you. And I think it's incredible when people are working to do policy work, and we need more Indigenous people on every level of policy work to make sure that we are always included. Can you talk a little bit about what the importance is of us, working in policy?
it's so important for us to work in policy, right? We have such a long history of people telling us what's best for us, right? Hundreds of years of policy and really bad policy that really actually embedded, you know, these deep roots of violence. And so it's so important that we share our stories and other people don't tell them for us. And ever since I was a little girl, right, I always loved reading books. And it's even a part of like my family history to be involved and to speak up and to, you know, be a voice for everybody to carry those good messages. And being at the Humphrey, I'm adding so many tools into my toolbox to be able to do this work, right? To be able to do the statistical analysis, to be able to create the surveys and to do the surveys and to run the numbers and to do those things. And it's so important that that work comes from us, right? Because those are our stories to tell. And we are educated, right? We know what's best for our people, and it's time that we reclaim that. And I'm really excited and hopeful for the future. And I'm really excited to see, you know, what's going to become of this work in the next 10, 15 years, right? Like Commissioner Harrington said, we don't want to have no more names added to that list. And there's so much intersectionality with this work, and it's so important that we all do everything, you know, we can to do that. And today, you know, seeing Lieutenant Governor Flanagan, you know, almost in tears that she can't do anything in regarding to stopping the Line 3, but she's focusing on what she can do. And I think that's so important that we focus on the things that we can do and not to get stuck on the things that we can't do. Because every little thing moving forward is going to help us get to where we need to be, and that's, you know, MIWRC, a good life for everybody. Miigwech.
Miigwech. So I'm curious, you know, this last year has been certainly one like I've never experienced in my lifetime, right? So much has happened since our march and rally last year. I want to ask each of you, like, what do you see as some of the both positive and negative experiences you've seen around this issue in the last year? Yeah, and Misty, maybe we'll start with you.
I guess within the past year, there has been such a heightened or awareness, right? Like more people are talking about it. It seems like when I'm mentioning the initials, people at least know what it is for the most part now. So that's really amazing. The support that is being offered for the people who are going through and doing the work and writing these reports that the public needs so that they can relate to the issue. I think all that work this past year has been really amazing and inspiring to see. I would say the really bad part about it is, you know, with COVID, there has been such an increase in violent crimes, like period. And we know how that manifests within Indian country. So our women are being forced right now to, you know, live in isolation with their abusers, where maybe before they were able to get away for the day or get out for the afternoon. And now they're there just, and it's bad. And it does seem like there has been a definite increase in calls. People saying that their young relatives have been turned out. They're stuck over here at this trap house and they're wanting someone to go get their relative. Those calls are becoming more and more infrequent as well. You know, people are depressed and we don't know how to respond. And sometimes people turn to chemicals and that makes them more violent. And that also makes people more prone to being taken advantage of and manipulated.
Thank you, Misty. Adriana?
When I think of the positive experiences that happen around the missing murdered Indigenous peoples movement, I think of our Indigenous women like Mary Lyons and others like her who are and always have been on the front lines demanding change. And I think of the emerging leaders and the young people that are also standing up following the past they created. I think of those who courageously share their stories because these stories are ours. And as painful as they are, they need to be told by us and not by other people. I think about the men that have reclaimed their rightful role of protecting the women and children in their communities in various ways. There are so many things that are positive in reclaiming who we are, in re-indigenizing the spaces we are in, but we still have to recognize the not so good things to move towards a future where these painful stories are actually in the past. One pervasive and prevalent issue I see in MMIW-R work is how common it is in our communities to look the other way or justify somebody who perpetuates this violence because of the status they hold. We time and time again are given the opportunities to change the systems that have created these prevalent issues, but we time and time again don't take them. There is also deeply embedded violence that is perpetuated outside of our communities, like being misrepresented in the media. For instance, the Urban Indian Health Institute in the second report of the Our Bodies, Our Stories series found that out of the 506 cases of MMIWG, they covered 129 of these cases, examining 934 articles. Of these, 46 media outlets used violent language in 50% or more of the cases they covered, and 22 used violent language in all of the articles they ran. They defined violent language that is racist, misogynistic, or stereotypical, and included references to drugs, alcohol, sex work, gang violence, victim criminal history, victim blaming, making excuses for the perpetrator, and more. Talking about the grief we carry is never an easy thing to do, but in healing, we can overcome the negatives and turn them into positives for future generations.
Thank you. That's very powerful indeed. And I think, you both brought up incredibly important issues. Misty, talking about the increased vulnerabilities this last year, right, of our relatives who may be now in their homes with someone who's causing them harm, or our relatives who have, because of the trauma they've experienced, have turned to chemicals, drugs, or alcohol, which leads to an increase in vulnerability to be used, to be exploited, and to be harmed. And we have seen a number of those stories, and then Adriana, you brought up some incredible points around, the media and the media, accountability and the media portrayal of us. Oftentimes we don't hear our stories. And when we do, the language that's used around us, we see mugshots, we see pictures that really gets the public to think that we're to blame for what's happened to us, right? And it gets easier for people to other us and to dismiss us. And then it continues to happen. I've thought so much about, when we were doing our Garden of Truth research, one of the women told a story that one of the sex buyers said to her, "I thought we killed all of you." And that really is a sentiment that some people think when they look at us, when they look at our daughters. And that's also the level of violence that we are experiencing on the streets. So what is one wish for our communities regarding this issue that each of you has? Adriana, do you want to start?
Yeah, if I can start. One wish that I have for our communities is that we continue to strengthen the relationships that we have between one another, so we can continue to work together to overcome these various issues. And in doing so, our future generations don't have to be a statistic of violence, and to really be aware of the intersectionality of the issues that we face. Miigwech.
Thank you. Misty, I'm sure you have thought about this. You probably have lots of wishes, right?
So many. How do I pick one? I think what I would choose, though, is getting back to who we were, and what those beliefs were, right? That we were a community, that we all had a place, and that we were all taken care of. And we also, the strength to have the hard conversations that surround this epidemic. You know, a long time ago, if you hit your partner, you were banished from the tribe. You didn't get to come home. You never got to see your family again. And if you molested a child, some tribes you were killed. And these are hard conversations, but that would be my wish, for us to be able to move forward in a more traditional way, but in a real way.
Wow. You know, thank you for that. Thank you both. We have talked a lot about, you know, that idea of returning to some of the, to our traditions and to those traditional values. And how do you see that happening in this world, right? Because we don't live the same way we used to live. So what does that community accountability look like today?
I think that a piece of the community accountability is listening and believing to people when they share their story, and to just to speak up when you know something is going on, right? And to really look within yourself, and to ask yourself, why don't you believe that person? You know what I mean? Why are you not a believer to the story that they're sharing? And you see it all the time on Facebook, right? You see it. You see people coming to stand with these perpetrators, right? And you have all of these women and all of these people, you know, speaking up and saying, hey, that person actually did something really not good, and we're still going to allow them to hold the status that they do within our communities. And so I think that there is we need to bring back some of those traditional things like shaming and those kind of things, right? Because those kind of things, they work, right? Everything is so swept underneath the rug at all times. And we really have to peel that back. And yeah, I'm actually looking forward to what Misty has to say about this.
I think it's the idea of what we need to challenge ourselves of what we deem as socially acceptable. Mm-hmm. You know, I remember when I was in the 6th grade, we had the health class, right? Separated the boys from the girls, and we went in our separate rooms to have our privates talk. And I remember that teacher telling us that if we were being sexually assaulted, to yell fire, because nobody would come help me if I were yelling rape. And that's where it starts. You know, when we talk about this historical trauma that we all carry in our bloods, that DNA, and this is a hard pill to swallow, we also have to be patient and learn and understand that violence and those tendencies are also generational, right? But the exciting and hopeful thing is that we have so many allies and so many non-Indigenous people who are willing to stand with us on this issue and to help carry our voices. So now is the time to capitalize on that and to be really thinking not just about my children or my grandchildren, but I'm thinking 7 generations down the road. What are the things, the practices, and the teachings that I can leave behind for them so that they're not repeating the mistakes of my generation and the people that came here before me? You know, and if we're trying to look through at the world through rose-colored glasses, we're going to miss the red flags. So these are real conversations, and it's going to get messy, but I have a lot of faith that now is the time that we can move forward, not just as Indigenous people and descendants of colonizers and refugees and immigrants, but just as human beings, because that's what we all are when it boils down to it. It doesn't matter what our assigned gender was at birth or how we identify today. We're souls in these containers. And that's what we need to remember and get back to.
Yeah, because as humans, despite our differences, we all love and grieve in same or similar ways. Miigwech, Misty.
Yeah, and I think, Misty, you bring up a really, really good point. I think that sets our Indigenous communities up a little different than, our philosophy is a little different than other communities, and that we are not just thinking about what's in it for me, right? And we are thinking about not only, the 7 generations behind and the 7 generations going forward. And so how do we always look to make sure that we need to, that the work that we are doing today is working for those 7 generations? So along with that, what needs to happen to continue to push this? What outreach, what work, what organizing needs to happen from your perspective to continue to push this issue even farther?
All of the good work that is currently being done by organizations such as the Minnesota Indian Women's Sexual Assault Coalition, 2 and 8 MMIW, and all of the grassroots organizing across Turtle Island needs to continue, because your commitment to ending this violence does not go unnoticed. And I thank you for this continued effort. Outside of continuing the good work that already takes place, I want to challenge our elected officials, tribal, state, and federal, to enact policies that protects and uplifts our women and children. You can find various recommendations in the report on Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women Task Force, a report to the Minnesota legislation. Beyond that, we can also begin to address the child welfare systems and the removal of Indian children, and enact the kind of policies that don't automatically remove your children from your care. There is also a need on educating our young people about healthy relationships. And outside of these government structures, we need to figure out within our communities how we work towards ending violence in a way that promotes healing to the victims and hold the perpetrators accountable in a culturally specific way.
Thank you. Misty?
We need to dismantle the systems who financially benefit from these predatory practices of tearing apart our families. I know Senator Kunesh has some upcoming legislation that would be talking about bringing in consent conversations into our schools, which would be really amazing. Yeah, we need to fight our own insecurities and our own things and really support victims when they come forward, because that is such a scary thing to do. And we all need to come to that realization that, yes, while we all know at least one woman who has been assaulted in one way, chances are we know at least one man who's doing it. And as much as we're holding and loving that individual who has been assaulted, we need to start having some accountability and healing for those people who are doing this, so that they're not continuing those patterns into the future generations. And we need to get back to the land. Once we do that, that connection between individuals won't seem so hard to get through, I believe.
I love that. And as we wrap up this conversation, I just want to ask you both, community activism is hard work, and policy and legislation, it's all hard work. And so what do you do to take care of yourself?
Every morning, I wake up and I make myself coffee. I smudge, I make breakfast for my family, and I water my flowers. Having a consistent morning routine, although small, is something that makes me feel good about starting my day. I also like to sing songs that I've learned from my sisters, like the Anishinaabe, Kwe, and Nibi song. Throughout the year, I partake in traditional activities like berry picking and sugar bush with my family. And doing this helps me restore my connection with them and with Mother Earth. And sometimes when I'm feeling down, I go to the water. And when I leave, I feel rejuvenated. I also take care of myself by making time to listen to the stories that can only be told in the winter. But other times, self-care for me is taking a mental health day away from my studies or my work and not being ashamed that I need a break. For many of us engaged in this work, experiencing it and researching it go hand in hand. And when we take care of ourselves, we can take care of our families. Miigwech.
I do a lot of things to take care of myself. But I think the first thing is understanding and believing that you do deserve that time. Because it takes a lot to be able to fight through that guilt of, why do I deserve to be sitting here in joy when I know so many are hurting? So being able to let that go was the first big step. I like to get to the water at least once a day in nice weather. And I go sing, or I just sit and I talk with her. That's really good for my soul. I have a cat that I taught how to play fetch. So we have a fun time. And on those days where I'm just really angry or I'm really hurt, I play Call of Duty. I don't care how that sounds. I like to shoot things, and yeah. So that's how I take care of myself.
Right on. Thank you both. Thank you both for your work. Thank you both for doing all the amazing things you do in community every day, not just on one day of the year, not just on 2 days of the year, but every day, making a difference in our communities. And thank you for joining us today.
Miigwech for having us.
Yeah.
All right. I am now going to be handing things off for a short time to Sheila Zephier of the Minnesota Indian Women's Resource Center, and Scheherazade, a very good friend of mine, Scheherazade Tillet. Hello. I have missed you. I wish we were in person together.
I know. I miss you too. So happy to be here in community, though.
Although it's very cold here today. So I don't know how cold it is in Chicago, but it's very, very cold here. So I'm looking forward to listening to the youth activist panel. I can't wait. I know that there will be some incredible voices. I think our young people are on fire, and man, they're just leading in so many incredible ways. So I can't wait. So I am logging off to make sure that there's room for all of the young people, and I will rejoin you soon. So thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. Excited to see our young people. So welcome everybody to In Solidarity for our youth panel for the day. I am Scheherazade Tillet. I am from A Long Walk Home, an organization based here in Chicago, Illinois. It's an art organization that uses art to empower young people to end violence against women and girls. And I just wanted to say a couple words. For the past 4 years, Long Walk Home has traveled from Chicago, as Nicole said, and we've gone to, I think, colder, which is Minnesota, and have really been in a beloved community and in solidarity, marching with Indigenous community, creating awareness around the missing and murdered. And I was reflecting the other day with our young people on words that they said around that march and what it meant for them. And they echoed words. They said they felt like that march they felt loved. They said in community, it was a spiritual. They felt welcomed. It was urgent and sacred, right? And so those are just some of the words that kind of why we kind of have we go every year and the feelings that we have. I asked a young girl to just reflect also on the march, and she says, I marched here in solidarity with Indigenous women and girls because our stories are connected. Black and Indigenous girls and women are missing and murdered, and the media turns a blind eye. Our communities fail us. I march because if we don't march for each other, who else will? And so it's why we created this panel here today. Me and Sheila have been organizing this panel. This march, traditionally, when I go to it, it's led by the elders, and it's also, for the last 2 years, have been led by young people. And so I think it's so important that we have our young people here. This March last year was our last field trip that A Long Walk Home took before the pandemic began. And so it's a very special place for us. And I just wanted also just to point out that fact that we're like, virtually, but we're in Minnesota, and Minnesota is a place where that our country began to reckon in terms of a racial justice movement, right? The death of George Floyd happened in Minnesota. And it was filmed by a young person, a Black 17-year-old Darnell Frazier, who brought that awareness to us, right? So the leadership of young people, particularly young women and girls, have brought us to this reckoning, this moment. And so I feel like this panel that we have today, this really full panel, Sheila has been like 4 years in the making. Working on the fact that we've just kind of been showing up in community for each other. And so very excited to hear from our young people.
Hamatak yapi chante washte anape chuzapi ya. Washitu ya Sheila Zephier makyapi. Hello, my relatives. With a good heart, I shake all of your hands. So my name is Sheila Zephier, and I work with the Minnesota Indian Women's Resource Center, where we empower American Indian women and families to exercise their cultural values, integrity, to achieve sustainable life ways while advocating for justice and equality. So that's who I am, and we're going to introduce the youth now. Okay, so with me, I have Amber Sky, who is a junior, and Hopa, who's a sophomore at South High School in Minneapolis. Both girls are enrolled members of the Oneida Nation, Oglala and Turtle Mountain Ojibwe. And my granddaughter, Laurel, who is a junior at Harding High School, and she is a Santee Dakota. So that's who we have today. So thank you guys for joining in.
And I have also some incredible young people. My heart is just warming seeing us all in community together. I have Angelina. She is a girlfriend, a youth for the past 2 years. She's a high school senior. And she attended this march in 2019. She's an incredible activist, poet, photographer, and curator. I also have Anaya, who joined A Long Walk Home the same year as Angelina, and she's now a freshman at University of Wisconsin-Madison. Anaya has played a pivotal role in many Chicago organizations, focusing on reproductive and environmental justice. She considers herself an activist and a community organizer, and plans to create her own organization for youth of color. And last but not least, Aziya, who is a young girl from the organization KOCO, lives in Chicago. When she was a 7th grader, she created a march called We Walk for Her, a march for the missing and murdered girls in Chicago. So I welcome you all to this panel. I'm so excited to get it started and hear from you.
So our first question that we have is going to be for all panelists, and we would like to know, how has the missing and murdered affected you, your family, or your community? And I don't know how we want to start. Who wants to go first?
I'll go first. Hey, my name is Aziya. How are you guys? I'm the one who started the march. It affected me because, like, it affected my neighborhood because girls were scared to, like, walk home and go home. And, like, the missing girls was missing. Nobody was really talking about it, making it seem like it really wasn't a big deal. Girls' bodies was getting found and stuff like that. So it was really scary. It was scary to be a girl in our neighborhood walking home at night, knowing it wasn't no protection. Nobody really cared or was bringing it up or nothing. So it affected us deep. It hit us like it hit home, like it could be one of us.
How the missing and murdered has affected like us. So we have two of our relatives, Eugene, Gina Ray Tallman, and then Victoria Alvarez. They were murdered in 2015 by her husband. She was trying to leave a domestic abuse or abusive relationship. And so it's like after that, it kind of like opened our eyes, I guess, to like that is very like, those situations happen like kind of a lot in our community. It's kind of scary. And then also like just like us as young women, and it's like what I'm sorry, I forgot her name. What she had said is like we were scared, and it's like
to like go out by ourselves, and it's like, and it's kind of just like looked past, like nobody really talks about it.
It just feels like we kind of have like a target on our back. Like it kind of makes us like we have a lot of like kind of like trust issues, I guess you could say, to like just like anyone, you know, like it's just like it's really scary. Yeah.
Another youth from A Long Walk Home want to chime in?
I'll go. My name is Anaya Frazier, and I guess like everyone has been saying, like it's hard. It's always been hard. Seeing people and girls that look like me go missing, and then like even having a friend who once went missing and then was found murdered is terrifying to know that things like that can happen to bodies like mine. It's just really hard, and I think especially the summer that we had the visibility project, things got harder, and it was kind of a change of life because like with the cases going up and stuff and nobody really doing anything, the only thing our communities could do was like tell us to come in earlier, make sure you're staying with people while you're out, make sure you're staying with groups of people and you're not alone. So it's just been hard. Yeah.
And definitely on that note, like although visibility is important, it doesn't make it easier to go to sleep at night. It doesn't help you, you know, feel safe in your own city. It makes you more fearful. And on top of, you know, being fearful and being a woman of color in a city that is not made for you, it's like now I have to be my own protector. I'm the protector of my friends, or the protectors of girls on the bus, or the protectors of girls I see walking home late at night. It's like I take on another responsibility, just being in my own city and not being safe.
So it's affected me and my family. I'm cousins with Amber. Also, like, my parents are afraid to let go out like by ourselves. We always have one of our brothers, and like I understand why, but it just gets really annoying. Like it sucks that this we have to worry about, and it's not talked about. So yeah.
Thank you, Laurel.
Thank you guys for sharing that, how much has deeply impacted you guys from a personal and community level, and hope everyone who's watching understands how much of a burden that is in every sort of way, and how it has impacted us all. My question actually is for you, Angelina, just reflecting the fact that, you know, we've gone to this march every single year, right, for the last 4 years. And I'm curious about you going, you know, from Chicago to Minnesota and being in an Indigenous community. How has this march like impacted you? And if you could kind of talk about some of the things, how it has impacted you in the work that you've been doing.
Yeah. I remember the first time going to the march and being so cold in Minnesota. I loved it there. It was beautiful. But yeah, the jarringness of like, oh, this is real. And seeing how just the energy of the space, like when you walked into the center and we were learning these things, I'm like, wow, I feel their pain. I know this pain. It's familiar to me. And so for me, I couldn't just sit here and, you know, have all this knowledge. I needed people to know that there are missing and murdered Indigenous women, there are missing and murdered Black women all over the city. And it's like, how do I channel myself as an artist into this space and uplift this space and uplift these girls that aren't being heard? And so I work with the Museum of Contemporary Art, their teen arts program, and we have the opportunity to curate an exhibit. And I was like, you know what? I want this time to focus on missing and murdered women, not just in Chicago, but all over the world. Like, I want to use this space and use this museum platform so that these women, you know, have a name, have a voice, that they are not just missing, but they are family members, they are sisters, they are mothers, they are lovers, like that these women have a space here. And it's been very important to me. I've done numerous projects, from like end of the year projects to photography projects to creative writing pieces. This is very near and dear to my heart, ever since going to the march that day.
Was Anaya going to answer too, or?
Just Angelina.
Okay, just Angelina. Okay, sorry about that.
Thank you, Angelina.
So Amber, Sky, and Hopa, I just want to ask you to, can you describe your leadership, your youth leadership in our community, and how can you use that platform to create awareness for MMIW-R awareness?
Okay, so both of us were on the youth council, and I've for the Minneapolis Native American Youth Council. So I've been on the past 2 years, and so last year and this year, and then so has Amber. But it's like there's like we like as Indigenous youth, we face a lot of problems, and like this is just like one of them. So it's like we're kind of like trying to just like spread awareness about it, because like it's just like a lot of people just don't like know, like even like other Native youth, like they don't understand like how like of a risk this is for us, or like how big of a problem this is, and like how much it like takes a toll on us, and like
and then so like I guess like so on the youth council last year we had like kind of like a theme, or like something that we wanted to like focus on for that year, and that's what we wanted to focus on was MMIW, and so yeah, just like bringing awareness, and it's also kind of like what Angelina had said, like just like playing that like protector role, like to other women and other young girls in our community, and it's just like looking out for each other and like just being there, just like protecting each other, things like that. It's really important because like she said, a lot of like people, a lot of young girls in our community aren't even aware of like what really does happen, like that it really is a possibility for us to go missing, or
or even just like educating adults, because like a lot of people, like I said earlier, a lot of people don't like know like this is a thing, you know, like that we are at such a high risk, and then it's just like yeah, just basically trying to spread awareness to everybody. So, thank you.
Thank you.
So as I mentioned earlier, Amber Sky is now a junior in high school, and her freshman year, because she wanted to go to South and be in their All Nations program, I was having her take the bus alone. And as we became more and more aware of the high rate of MMIW, and we were just becoming more and more aware of the young women that were being harmed by MMIW. And then when Hopa started at the school as well, I started driving them, and just our schedules kind of changed. But at some point, Amber Sky came to me and was like, Mom, I'm really scared. Like this is real. And so with her expressing her own fear of what the possibilities are, we've changed policy in our family as far as the girls are not to go out alone with public transportation. If they are going to go somewhere, it's either I drop them off and pick them up, or they have to be together and they have to go in groups. So that leads to my question. And I know, Laurel, you kind of hit on it a little bit earlier when you were saying how it had affected you and your family, and how your parents are a little more afraid to let you guys out. But is there anything more specifically, how, like I said, we don't do public transportation alone for the girls. So I'm just wondering, what are some things that your parents do to keep you and that safe?
Yeah. So they are pretty strict with who we hang out with, and they're also strict with my brothers, but not the same way. Like if me and my sister walk to the store or something, usually one of them has to come with us, if not both of them. When we go over to our friend's house, they have to make sure to have contact with their parents, and they don't let us hang out with people they have already met them and their parents. So I don't know, just things like that. We're also not allowed outside after dark. I don't know. Like I said before, you have to take precautions, but I completely.
And then just for whoever wants to answer, how can we as adults better support our youth leadership?
I was talking about this earlier, with Anaya from A Long Walk to Home. She said what she said was they so judgmental. Before they could really understand us, right now we need more support than ever, because girls are really, Black and mixed girls are really attacked. So we need more support from women who already went through this at the same age. They so much judgmental with us. They really downfall us, which they shouldn't do, even though we get downfall from everybody else. We shouldn't have to do it to ourselves, or to our youth, or to our kids, or anything. It's so much downfall in here. So it'd be so hard to pick each other up when all we do is down each other, So I think from the adults, we need more help and support, more, better understanding. Not more so just thinking they right all the time. It's a new whole generation, new year. They, So yeah.
Thank you, Aziya.
I thought it was interesting when you all were talking about the different ways in which you are able to pick up your daughters and stuff from school and things. And I was just thinking about when I lived with my mom, how public transportation was the only means of transportation that I have. And so she couldn't be there for me. And the only protection that I would have some days coming home from the programs and school that I came home from was sometimes just a phone, and me having to fake I was on the phone and call up a friend so that they could make sure that I make it home that night. And I don't think adults sometimes understand that that is hard, and that we need compassion, because a lot of times instead of like giving us that compassion, they'll tell us to like be mindful of how we dress and be mindful of how we present ourselves outside, so that nobody can like, so that we're less likely to be harmed outside. When the thing about it is, regardless of like what we wear or how we act, like if somebody is going to do something to us, or if somebody decides to take us, that's going to happen regardless. And adults just don't give us the compassion that we need, and don't understand like that sometimes that also takes away from our girlhood, because we aren't able to like play in the manners that we want to play, or just be outside and with our friends like we want to. And I don't think they realize that all the time. So I think compassion, we definitely need compassion from adults.
Thank you, Anaya, and thank you for also talking about what it has stripped us from in terms of like our magic and our play and our freedom. I want to ask Aziya, really, because I think she created this march when she was in 7th grade, and it really came from, I think, when adults fail us, or systems fail us, right? Like a 7th grade, that was the only march, and to the day, this is not the only march that I know of in Chicago that centers on the missing and murdered girls and women. And so, Aziya, can you talk a little bit about the march and your leadership around that and creating it at such a young age as a 7th grader?
I was 13 when I started the march, like 3 years ago. Because I felt like nobody was helping us. Nobody really cared about the Black missing girls going missing. It wasn't really getting noticed like it should. And like, I just want to bring awareness to the situation, because as youth is really hard, like really hard. And I know I keep saying it, but it is. So to be a youth, especially a Black girl in Chicago, it'd be so hard. So I wanted people to understand, make a march about we walk for her, all the Black missing girls that been missing, like let them know it's somebody out here who do care and raising up, because wasn't nobody gonna speak about that. I'm the only person, well, still to this day, I'm the only person who made a march in Chicago, Illinois, on the South Side, raising awareness about the situation. I felt like I couldn't just sit back and let all these girls go missing and me not seeing anything. And it could be me. I almost had a situation where I got snatched and I had to, just like Amina said, had to act like you on the phone. Is no way we should be going through this. And I'm 13, 14. I'm 16 now, and it's going on my 4th year. We're doing the marches. So, yeah.
Well, I thank you. I went to that march, and and I went to Minnesota, and to see these two young people leading and their leadership, it's been incredible. And so I wanted to ask you all the last question. I feel like we're just beginning this, Sheila, right? Like, you feel like we could, like, the power of this panel is so strong, and I hope that we just continue this. It's just the beginnings of what we're going to do. But I wanted to ask you guys, because this is a unique situation. I said this is 4 years in the making of Indigenous youth and Black youth coming together, talking about the missing and murdered. And I think we have a lot to really learn right here. But our historically, in terms of our cultures, have always been linked in terms of our liberation. And so I wanted just to ask you guys all, if you guys could quickly reflect on what does solidarity look like between Black and Indigenous youth around missing and murdered girls and women and people?
Me personally, I think that question is funny, right? Because I feel like it looks like this. It looks like us coming together and being there for each other, also raising awareness for each other, because the thing is, if y'all not free, I can't get free. My freedom, in order for me to be free, y'all have to be free too. So we have to be there for each other, because our struggles are not polar opposites. So yeah, it's just.
I agree. We're kind of coexisting in the same space, if that makes sense. And so it's we can't work against each other. We got to work together to, really get out of these situations. And again, it looks like this. It looks like more of this and this happening more frequently, and sharing resources and sharing stories and saving space for each other and noticing like it's not just one secular incident. Like there's multiple incidents that lead to this, and we're all connected in some way and somehow.
Yeah, I just think like things like this event, like this is really cool that we are showing like solidarity, like standing together, and like the fact that some of these youth on here have came to the march, the MMIW march here in Minneapolis, like that's really cool. Then I was just telling my sister that I would love to go to that march in Chicago and stand with you guys. And yeah, and I just think it's like them, like they just said, we face a lot of the same issues, and we've gone through a lot of the same traumas, and it's just being there for one another and just showing support for each other. Yeah, thank you.
Well, I thank all you guys for those in the audience who are watching us and seeing this power of these young people. And I thank you guys for sharing so much of your stories and your leadership around this work. Sheila, thank you for doing this, collaborating and organizing this panel with me. I would just like to end with the two young people from A Long Walk Home with their youth and their creativity. They have written a poem called The Ode to the Missing and Murdered. And this poem really came about for that year that they really spoke about, where there were so many missing girls and Black girls going missing and murdered in Chicago. And they performed this poem, one as a call of action to common community, but also as a visual to those who've gone missing and murdered. And so we would like to share that with on this march today with the community as well. So I'd like to give it to Angelina and
Excuse me, this is the ASL interpreter. Is it possible for me to switch out with Sarika, please? If you all wouldn't mind hanging up. Thank you so much.
No problem.
This is an ode to the missing and murdered. When Amber went missing, they named an alert after her. When Sharnissa went missing, they did nothing. It makes sense. The disappearance of Black girls has gone on for centuries, starting in Africa, when men would steal children to make them their brides.
They say she used to be a body once. She used to have a body, a bad one, hair kinky enough to turn into cuffs around a man's hands, eyes that would trap a man, trap a men's circle around her.
So she made a funeral out of her own body, a sacrifice to the ones that came before her.
And the ones that keep coming.
Or leaving.
Wonder if it's because of her Black girl magic. Men think that she don't need coverage.
Like she can snap her own way back into existence or something.
And then I remember, if she was only 3/5 to begin with, maybe she's always been missing. Maybe I've always been missing.
We will always be missing.
How do you put back together a family tree that was never whole to begin with? How do you expect the country that took her to report her gone?
It's easy to drown in an ocean with 2 concrete blocks attached to your ankles to remind you this country wasn't made for you.
They did not report the news of her disappearance. They did, however, report that they found the body of a missing girl.
Age?
16.
Name?
Desiree.
Race?
Black.
The shadow.
Where does the Black girl name go when she leaves? Must I carry the weight of it in my mouth? Or does that begin to vanish too? Desiree, Desi, Des.
Shh. What do you do when your invisible best friend goes missing? No one believes you because they can't see her, but you know that she left because she left you empty. I have a theory. Black girls are born stars.
Already dead by the time the world finally sees them.
The way they make it seem like Amber was the first to go missing.
But every Black girl knows that the hundreds went missing from countries.
To missing from plantations.
To missing
from the south side of every city. Thank you.
Thank you, Angelina and Anaya. I had to grab my Kleenex. Thank you for that. That was beautiful. Thank you for showing up for us. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for being here. We can't wait till we can come to Chicago and show up for you all. Can't wait till we can all be in community again. We're so grateful for our work with A Long Walk Home. I'm so grateful to our young people for all the ways that they show up in community, that they show up for each other, that they show up. And we want them to continue. This world that we are building is so that they continue to show up, that we don't have another one that goes missing, that we don't have to tell these stories, that we don't have another relative who's been gone too soon. I want to end today. Well, before we do, we will have a traditional closing with Janice. But I want to say a few words about what you all can do in your communities. Because this is not just about one day, not just about one moment. This is about every day. This is about how we show up in community, how we engage in this issue, how we support the activists and what's happening, how we support grassroots efforts, whether it's showing up to look for a relative who is missing or donating supplies or money to the people who are, or bringing food to the people who are looking for our relatives, to light a fire, a sacred fire for our relatives who have gone missing, to hold a community dialogue or conversation with your loved ones, with your community, to raise awareness about this issue, to develop programs and activism within your own communities, to keep calling our legislators to action, to make sure that our voices, that these issues are in every policy, every level of government, that we are not invisible. And that we continue to organize and work with each other, that we support each other, that we don't tear each other down, that we keep working to support our efforts, to support each other, that we continue to show up for each other. And every single person and every one of us and every one of you is needed in this work and in community. And we are so grateful for the partnership and for the love of our community. And I can't wait until we can be in person again, till we can see each other, till we can greet each other with a handshake and a hug. And I look forward to seeing you all again. I think we're going, Janice, I think we are ready for you to do a traditional closing for us. And thank you for coming back.
Kami relatives, as I sat and reflected on the whole program, and it just invoked a lot of prayer thoughts in my heart. So I wrote those down, and I want to share them with you as closing reflections, and then I'll close with a prayer song. First of all, I want to thank the communities and organizations for a beautiful and resilient leadership and advocacy for our missing, murdered Indigenous women and relatives. I've always been a supporter of the women organizations that are helping families and women with trauma and domestic violence and victims of the missing and murdered populations. So I marched with the people in 2019 and sang the songs and held space. And I remembered my niece, Lolita Joy Drapo, who was murdered in Minneapolis in 1989. And that still is an unsolved case. And so our family had to go forward, and it was hard on us, on our spirits. So I can relate to the families that are still grieving. And so I think of them today. So I want to share with you that when we pray for the women who are missing and who were murdered, and maybe unrest in our hearts and souls, to hold that sacred space for the families and put offerings out for the victims. And so that way we are guiding them to rest in peace and call our own spirits back to continue to do the prayerful work. And I saw a comment in the live feed, and it was about creating safe space. And it reminded me of when I work with horses, the Partners of Healing, when we work with horses and Native women with trauma. And I remember the women had gotten such really powerful healing, which is all nonverbal, prayerful work with these horses. And this one woman said, after the horses were rolling on the ground and looked like they were having fun, but I think they were unearthing trauma. But this Native woman said, I want to do that. And I said, go ahead, do it. Do what you feel moved to. So she was rolling around on the ground with the horses, and it was funny, but it was her healing journey. She felt safe to do that. And so that's one thing that came to me. Lastly, I'll share is that trust is sacred when it comes to our women in healing. We hold prayer to become safe with our relatives so they can breathe, they can cry, and they can pray and heal. And so we hold space together, like this beautiful work today, these poems, the youth, the leaders. We hold space, we carry it forward, we cultivate it, we plant it in our communities, on the ground, in the earth. We cultivate it. We write about it. We cry about it. We water our earth with our presence of carrying this forward. And we send our voice in our songs and in sharing our voices, and have compassionate listening for our relatives, for them to have a very sacred space and safe space. As one of the women wrote, I think it was Fawn, thank you, Fawn. So we hold that space in a prayerful manner and be guided by the spirit and ancestors and relatives, even those women that have sacrificed their lives for us to carry this message forward. So I wanted to share that much with you. And the song that I'm going to offer in closing is to give comfort to the grieving families, to give comfort for the tireless advocates, to give comfort for our compassionate hearts. And so the song is a remembrance song, and we will remember them. They are not forgotten. Let us be the living memorial of resilience and love, for love is the healer. And so carry that love forward and be guided today in prayer. So I invite you again to take a breath, to quieten, to our hearts and pray together as one. The song is saying we remember them, we're honoring them today, and the families and people are still having a difficult time, so we pray and we send our voice to you. Iho. Mexoya ya ya Mexoya yo hayo 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 Wanka tanka makakijelo Mexoya yo hayo hayo Mexoya ya ya Mexoya yo hayo 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 Wanka tanka makakijelo Mexoya yo hayo hayo Thank you for all the blessings in this work and the messages and the conveyance. Mita oyate ketiwahida. Iho. Mitakuye owasi.
Miigwech, Janice. Thank you. Thank you so much for starting it in a good way and for closing it in a good way. I also want to thank all of the speakers today, all of the organizers, the partners, all the people, all the organizations who made this event happen. And a special thank you to Native Roots Radio Network who hosted our event today. Thank you for your continued support, for your partnership. We're so grateful to work with you all. So thank you all. Happy Valentine's Day. I look forward to seeing you all in community next year. And I thank you all for your work. Miigwech.